Hi, I'm KB, and I love movies. And today we have another conversation with a movie lover. We have Nathan Jones joining us. He is a podcaster, an educator, um, also a social media guy. So, why am I talking to you? Introduce yourself.
Well, hey, KB. I do those things. I'm mostly on YouTube most of the time. That's where a lot of my work is, and I'm sure if you're watching this, you'll see me there. But that's where a lot of my passion lies, and it's in film and physical media. So that's kind of what I do. I make videos over that and post on Letterbox, and I come up on podcasts occasionally. So yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, glad to have you. I have to say that um, you mentioned YouTube, and that's how I discovered you. It was like a trifecta. First, it was Elliot Cohen. Shout out to Elliot. And I literally went back to when his channel began. So all the banter with his dad, all that stuff, I went through all those videos, and I'm like, huh, he mentioned this Nathan guy a couple of times. And then I looked you up, and I was like, and he's American. Okay. And I watched your videos for a while, and then that got me on to who's this Sam guy he's talking about? And that got me into film blogger Sam. So it was like a trifecta of people, film lovers that I could relate to, because not only were you collectors, but you were cinephiles as well. And I appreciated that because I could relate with that. And I think the time when it really got like daily watching was when the three of you started to do the curating versus collecting thing. What was that, the beginning of last year?
Yeah, right. It was like maybe yeah, a good chunk of time past the pandemic. Yeah,
Mhm.
that was the start of the new year. I would think that's probably when we did that.
Yeah, and that was always kind of the direction I aimed at. But we'll talk about that. Before we go any further, I always like to start these things with a non-movie question. So my non-movie question for you is, why is the number 23 your favorite?
Well, I think you already know the answer to that one, but for people who are watching this, number 23, well, I don't think I've actually mentioned this on air, but my birthday is the 23rd of May, so it's coming up. And my two of my family members also have 23 as their birthday, and so 3 out of 4. And then, of course, growing up, I watched a lot of basketball. So Michael Jordan happened to
Mhm.
be what I was watching all the time as a '90s kid, especially that latter part of his career, kind of that '98 season, especially stands up in my mind. So yeah, 23 has been a lucky number for me. Not to harp on that number 23 movie with Jim Carrey, completely different end of the spectrum, but yeah, 23, and then now basketball, like I'm obsessed with it. So going back, and so it's always been around. So 23 is a good number. What about you? Do you have a lucky number?
Funny enough, 17, because I'm the 17th. My anniversary's on the 17th, and my youngest, my baby girl, we had a chance to pick when we were going to do the C-section. And I was like, oh, 17, that's easy.
Easy.
So, so I have those relations. Three out of possible six in my case. So,
That's a lot. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I have an affinity for that number too.
It's a good number.
So, movie talk. Let's get into it since it's both our favorite things to do. And I have to say, between like film Twitter and IG accounts and definitely YouTube, it's great to have a community where you could have those similar interests and get into things where, your average person really would not be able to express why they like a certain movie. It was really good and that's it, or I like the acting and that's it. So with that in mind, talking about your past videos, you've expressed your love for The Hateful Eight. We're going to start there.
I
So
have.
what is it about this movie compared to like other Quentin Tarantino flicks like Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction? What stands out with Hateful Eight for you?
That's a really good question. I haven't thought necessarily usually when I get posed the question of Tarantino films, right? I grew up on Kill Bill. That was my first iteration of, because 2003 and 2004, I think, around that time period. I was, in my teens when I was exposed to that then. So I was very enamored by that. However, as my movie journey has like come across, obviously in the 2010s, early 2010s or mid, I guess it'd be mid for Hateful Eight, right in the middle. Yeah, at that point, I had really fallen in love with things like the Before trilogy behind me,
Yeah.
and 12 Angry Men, and a lot of films that almost kind of come across as like a
stage play.
Stage play, exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Rope is one of my favorite Hitchcock films too. And most of the time, I mean, I've even heard arguments like that's not a movie. So, which, yeah, I'm like, well, agree to disagree.
He disagrees.
Yeah. So, but with Hateful Eight, that seems like it's a play, and I love the setting of it. I've, subsequently since then, I just recently watched El Grande Silencio, which is, a Western, the spaghetti Western set in, the snowy Utah region. And something about the setting, the dialogue, the words unspoken and the words spoken, and you just get really enamored by it. And I know it's not one of the snazziest Tarantino films. It's certainly, I think a lot of people, one of, the mid-level or weaker Tarantino films, but it's one of my favorites because of just how enamored I am by it. And also Ennio Morricone can't,
Yeah.
I talked about spaghetti Westerns. I mean, I love that score. That opening crawl is so inviting to me. So,
Yeah. I have to say that besides like just knowing the lineup of the cast and, the different people that he picks to be in his movies all the time, you see Sam Jackson, or you see Kurt Russell, or even Zoe Bell, stunt woman turned actress. And you're like, oh yeah, another Tarantino movie, I'm going to see it. If you remember, that was right around the time when Force Awakens was out, and they had like the traveling road show. So
I
got
know
to
about
see it in
this.
70 millimeter, and you
Yeah.
got like the program and everything. So I was fortunate to see it that way. A buddy of mine came out. Hello, Guy. And we went to see it, and it had the whole intermission, which if you see it on physical media, they just take that out. But it felt like an old time play or old time movie with it, the intermission, and we went out, got a couple Sam Adams, and took it back and enjoyed the second half of the movie. So I fell in love with the movie because not only was it a Tarantino movie, but it felt like an old time movie experience. So that really played into it for me. And like you said, you got your Kill Bills and your Pulp Fictions that people would consider to be the high tier or the favorites of a Tarantino movie. But, I also put Hateful Eight up there as well.
What about you? What is your particular favorite Tarantino film? If you had,
I like the continuation of Kill Bill, and I would love to see it as a whole bloody affair. Just both movies all together in one. I've never had the opportunity to see it that way. But that in Pulp Fiction, because Pulp Fiction is just a masterclass in screenwriting. Just the flash forwards and the flashbacks and having these multiple storylines. And unlike those, those rom-coms where they all come together at the end, there was none of that. So I was glad, there was some kind of like crossover from story to story. Yeah. But, it was, I love movies where you have to see it again. The moment you're watching it, you're like, I have to watch it. Yeah. So a recent example of that was Drive My Car, because I started to get the movie like halfway through it, and I immediately just wanted to see it again because now I knew what the movie was truly about. So now I wanted to start it over and see it again. But, as far as getting on like physical media or something, that's coming up. So what, July, I think Criterion's bringing it
Yeah,
out?
I actually am going to be patient and wait for it because I have not seen it yet, but I have heard quite amazing things about it, and I know it won quite a bit of awards. So I'm very excited about it. That's not the
Yeah.
reason I want to watch it, but yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that experience. And yeah, I don't know, that whole concept of going back and seeing something that you've like seen before, but learning about having that prior knowledge of something. I do think that is a very interesting experience because it can go either way. So I
Yeah.
feel like with maybe like a mystery thriller, trying to think of an example where if you watched it again, it would kind of cheapen that first time experience.
Murder on
Right.
the Orient Express.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you talking about the original or the the remake?
Either one, but
Yeah.
more recently, the newer one. It's like I don't need to see that ever again. I would watch the original one from the 70s
Right.
more times than I would watch the more recent ones.
Yeah.
Same thing with Death on the Nile.
Yeah. I wish
That
I still
doesn't need
haven't
more than
seen
one watching. Me neither. But I have ways to watch it besides, being out on physical media and everything. Talking about physical media from like a collecting standpoint, we're hearing rumors, left and right of these Tarantino movies possibly coming to 4K this year. The closest thing I've seen is True Romance, which he wrote, coming out on Arrow soon. But what are some of the ones that you're looking forward to adding to your collection?
for Tarantino.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would like a Hateful Eight, right? 4K. That would be great. And honestly, if you had the intermission attached to it, that would be incredible.
Yeah.
Because then I can have the whole experience here. Obviously, it's a little bit different. I don't have it's not the movie theater experience, but something like that. Other than that, maybe. I mean, I really wish that Inglorious Bastards had a better 4K release.
Yeah.
That's something because that's one of my favorite Tarantino films as well. I would really love to see that treated a little bit better. So I guess at the end of the day, my answer is most Tarantino films. I would love to see all of them, but I would like to see the treatment from maybe not so much the studio, more so outsourced to a company like Arrow or,
Yeah.
I don't know, Screen. I guess Criterion probably would put out a few of them, but yeah, something like that. What about you? You have any favorites coming up?
I'm hearing rumors of Pulp Fiction, so definitely would like to see that. You mentioned Inglorious Bastards. That's probably one, like I have a collection in my bedroom, so that's separate from what I keep in the rest of the house. And my kids even have their own collections in their rooms that are partially mine, but we won't go there. So I would like to have that one upgraded because that's probably the one that I watch the most. And you would think it's not the shortest of the QT movies, but it's one of those that are so engaging. Like once I get into it, it's like, if I can't sleep, I'm going to definitely watch that.
It's hard to
So,
turn off.
yeah. Collections. You have a lovely collection behind you and around you.
Yes.
If you get a chance, go and watch Nathan's collection review because you can see the room. For a long time, me personally knowing him, I was on the where does he keep all these movies? And then he walks in with a steady cam and he basically shows you a 360 of the room, and I was like, he has a movie room. This is beautiful. So it's great to
Lucky.
see. Yeah. But you recently did, like I said, this collection review. How big right now is your collection if you had to do a guesstimate?
Well, I actually have an application on my phone that I scan my barcodes. And I guess off the top of my head, I think it's around about 3,400 ish. But I want to kind of, yeah, actually, I'm literally two titles shy of that.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was very almost on the nose.
And one thing you're not shy about doing is blind buys.
Oh yeah,
you see it as a sense of discovery, which is really
yeah,
cool. I know
absolutely.
Elliot's the same way. It's a matter of you trust this director or you trust this boutique label or whatever the case may be. and you just want to discover uh, new movies or complete that filmography of a certain director, or like in my case, I'm a big Scorsese fan, and if I hear him talking about the Archers, well, guess what? Now I want to see how many of the Archers movies I can find, because if they inspire him, I want to see their stuff. And maybe in an interview, I might hear who inspired them and go from there. It's kind of like a never-ending history updating and so forth. But you have a large percentage of blind buys, I would call them. What would you say your percentage is?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, at least now, when it comes to, I'm going to go back a little bit and thinking about how I've come to this point. So I used to work at a record store that I know there where you're about. We used to have those there as well, the same chain. And that record store, I was mostly into music, and I still am very much into music, but I had more or less watched Tarantino films, Spielberg films, the typical blockbuster film that an occasional here, I would say a Miyazaki film or something that I would randomly find, but I never really was into anything in particular. I was always just wanting something new. It's the same with music, right? And my coworkers were good enough to suggest movies left and right. So one of those movies was In Bruges, which is, if people know who I am, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I talk about it ad nauseum, actually, because I love it so damn much. And
I see it right there.
yeah, it's right there. And then there's the poster right over there. And give me a 4K of that, please. I know Tino's eventually going to put it out. So, but yeah, so it all started with that, and just discovering like David Fincher and in Bruges and the art house films. I started watching more Bergman, and I started going all over the map. But all this is to say, most of the stuff that I like to watch are things that I hear about, right? Those are blind buys. I don't really look too much into them. In fact, I've almost turned away from trailers, depending on what type of movie I want to watch, because mainly I just want to go into it blind. And I do have a knack for liking things on pure, like minimal knowledge and just kind of experience levels. So I would say a good percent is the unwatched films that I have, like 95% of the films that I have are unwatched. I have some like Roma or Marriage Story that I've seen on like Netflix, but I still want to watch them on Blu-ray and on 4K and things like that. So
that happens to me a lot of times. Like maybe I'll borrow, like you mentioned, Criterion. Maybe I'll borrow a Criterion from the library, and then when the sales come around, I'll pick that up. But because I recently see it, I'm not quick to jump in and crack open a plastic and rewatch it. I might quicker go into the special features than watch actual disc. So a recent example of that would be when Citizen Kane came out on 4K. You would think, I want to see this pristine version of one of my favorite movies, blah, blah, blah. No, I went right to the special features because, I don't have enough hands and fingers and toes to count how many times I've seen Citizen Kane. So I watched a scene or two, awed at how great it looked, and I went to the special features disc. So that happens a lot. But even me, being that I buy more movies that I know or heard of, just as I get more into the Blue Tubers and finding people with similar tastes and just going off their recommendations of things, I starting to buy more and more blind buys, as I would call it, just because like I trust their opinion and I just want to see that movie as well. But my default is always, go with what you know, because like I have like over 300 DVDs that are now 4Ks that I need to slowly upgrade. So I quicker move to do that than a blind buy.
That's totally fair too. And I mean, this is making me think also, I mean, especially with the current situation, things are increasing in pricing, you know.
Yeah,
And so I am in a very good spot, and I will say that I'm financially okay and stable enough to support this. And that's a whole other factor too, is that I'm able to blind buy, right? Not everyone is able to blind buy. And so
right.
me talking about this, I'm like, not everyone is able to do that, but hopefully, with recommendations from myself or other people, or I mean, that's how I get a lot of my blind buys is usually like you were saying, it's other people kind of recommending and I trust them. And from that trust, and I watch it, I'm like, oh wow, that was completely something I didn't expect. I'm like, I'm glad that you recommended it. And more times than not, I am um, a positive person when it comes to watching a movie, and so I would say a good percentage of my films in my collection are 3.5 out of 5 and above.
Mm.
And when I
Yeah,
say that, I mean like I still enjoy, like I have Troll 2 or The Room over there. Like those are movies that like are terrible, but
yeah.
I love them because I have these experiences with other people. And
So
it's
bad
not,
it's good.
yeah. So, but I just always, for me, it's like I don't go into a movie expecting to not like it. And I would say 95% of the time, even if I didn't really care so much for a movie, I got something out of it still. Like,
Yeah.
and that's something that I enjoy about my own personality. So,
You kind of mentioned this, but when did you make the jump from just doing the studio releases and back catalogs to more focusing on more of the boutique labels like Arrow and now Imprint and Umbrella popping up too?
mhm.
Um, I mean, Criterion's there, but that goes without saying. And do you remember your first boutique label purchase?
I would say it's Criterion. And I do remember my first two buys were Seven Samurai and The Dictator. Those were my two first Criterion purchases, and I think it was around that time, going back to that record store, kind of just figuring out that some of these movies were on this label that I didn't really even know much about. And then I slowly, because I started watching, I initially started off, like I was saying, I was watching David Fincher and, the top 1,000 movies, IMDb, these types of films. They're like, everyone needs to watch these movies, right?
Yeah,
And I started watching them, and then I would see stuff like Wings of Desire or something like Wild Strawberries on that list. And like, well, what versions of that exist? And I'm like, oh, Criterion. And there you go. And then I just got exposed to it. And then I started slowly and then really fast all of a sudden just being like, all I want is these boutique labels. And then luckily, years ago, with all these new faces, as they're slowly coming out, are just hitting things out of the park, right? And so now it's a problem.
yeah. I would say out of all the labels right now, Kino is the one that's just killing the game.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
the purchases of licenses that they got from Criterion because they were late to the 4K game, so you could get something that's a Criterion Blu-ray or Kino 4K. Like I recently mentioned, Some Like It Hot or The Apartment is another one. So it's nice to see like someone is bringing these to the highest quality and format available.
And it's even, I mean, Kino is great because they are, I mean, they won't necessarily always package their films with like a ton of special features.
Mhm.
However, they're affordable enough, and also at the same time giving you that quality that the film deserves, right? And I
Yeah,
think that's what, like, especially like we were kind of talking about with 4Ks, especially, Kino's, doing a fantastic job. It's almost like too much because they're just like, we got to get this out now, right? And so I'm like, slow down. There's too much, too much stuff going on.
yeah. It makes you wonder how short of a window they have for owning the 4K format on certain titles.
Yeah.
Because it almost seems like they're rushing things out. Um, like last weekend, or I guess it came out this week. In the Heat of the Night
Mm.
is the one I just got because Sidney Poitier definitely. But like you're saying, not a lot of special features, but the things that they include are like, whoa, this is like a 3-in-1 deal because it included that. It had They Call Me Mr. Tibbs, which is the sequel, and that's all I knew. I knew those two movies. What I didn't know is there was a third movie called The Organization,
Oh
which
yeah, which I have.
it's actually a trilogy. I was unaware of that.
Huh.
So all three movies on that disc, you get In the Heat of the Night on 4K, and then the other two on Blu-ray. But that makes up for like Arrow with an entire disc of special features. There's still a few featurettes, trailers, things like that, but I'll gladly take two more movies in replace of another featurette or two.
Yeah, I mean that, and yeah, that's one of the reasons I think Kino is great because, like you were saying, it doesn't, it's affordability, and I think
Yeah.
affordability is incredibly important, especially as we move on to what's going on right now. Like I think because of we mentioned Imprint and Indicator is one of my favorite labels. They're, I mean, luckily Indicator has a U.S. market now, but getting something from Imprint is going to cost an arm and a leg. But obviously, there are some third-party sites which are really great, which I still utilize, like Orbit DVD or Diabolique DVD. Those are just two sites that I can think of off the top of my head that are really helpful, at least for us here. But at the same time, it is a market that is the prices are increasing, and so it is something to think about as we kind of move on forward. So
You mentioned that, and I immediately thought I have a cart with two things in there just sitting, waiting for me to add. Yeah, Diabolic DVD.
mm-hmm.
For Second Sight is bringing out Drive.
Yeah, and Dog
And
Soldiers just got announced too. I know.
yeah, and I really don't need the $80 version
Of Drive.
but yeah, but the
I
movie
really want
alone
it.
is 30. So it's $5 less than I see in other places. And another movie I won't mention, but if I pull the trigger, it will be my first Umbrella title.
Ooh, I have
Yeah.
one. I have one. So
Which one do you have?
I have Possession. So
Yes, I still have the Blu-ray of that with the Mondo cover, and yeah, I haven't upgraded that one yet. And I'm really stalling in my mind because I asked you the question about your first boutique label purchase, and I've been trying to remember what
yeah,
mine
I was
was.
gonna say, what about you?
Royal Tenenbaums, Criterion DVD, $5 from a coworker.
Oh, nice.
We had like a little marketplace on our email system, and it was like, I'm selling movies, and I'm like, got that, got that, got that. Ooh, Royal Tenenbaums, and I went and gave my $5, and I'm like, the Criterion collection. What's this? This is new. So glad to have that, and since then I have a lot more Criterion DVDs and Blu-rays and 4Ks now. Not as many as I'd like. There's always more.
I mean, even with the sales, it's still, I mean, you get 5 movies, you're going to spend $100. So, yeah. Which is a lot, but
I look forward to you coming so we could do that in July again. That was fun.
Oh yeah, if many people don't know this, but KB and I are in proximity of each other, not too far away, so we're able to travel a little bit. But we did a video on my channel where we went to Barnes and Noble and we're able to peruse the shop there and get some criterions and recommend some lists for people, and it was a lot of fun. So
yeah, I enjoyed that. Got to do that again.
Oh yeah.
And now it could be on both our channels.
Yeah. We didn't mention it, but I mean, I'm so happy that you're able to start this channel now, and it's been. I mean, I've loved it so far.
Thank you.
What we've been putting out, so it's great.
Thank you. A couple more before we land this plane. Tell me about your movies in a decade series.
Yes. So A couple years ago, I want to say 2018 is when I did this initially. I don't know what it is, and I don't think I realized it until last year. But I really like kind of little gimmicks is like maybe a negative connotation, but more or less just some way I want to tackle my collection, right? I want to curate and figure out something about a specific decade, for instance, which we'll get to, or like an auteur or a director or cinematographer or whatever. But I always like to tackle my collection in a certain way. And I'm having a hard time remembering like how this idea populated in my mind, but I do want to say that I started watching maybe some 1920s and 30s films, and then I started thinking that I could possibly like, well, let's just do a different movie, decade, and I can get it all the way up till the end of the year, and from there I just started getting things off my shelf and starting, if you saw the thumbnails of those videos, you could see piles of different decades. And what I wanted to do was I just wanted to pick a few, but I have such a hard time like saying this is the best thing. So I'm like, all right, well, let's just do it year by year. And then it's going to get harder and harder as the years go by, the more movies that I've seen. And say this is my favorite movie at this moment from this year, and then a lot of honorable mentions, right?
Right.
Because I want to make sure that people don't in the comment section say something. Why didn't you mention this? It's like, well, I did mention it, but it's not my favorite of that year. And from there, I decided, to revisit this last year, and you were a guest on this, and I decided to expand this not just to every year I would talk about a movie. I wanted to talk about the whole decade as a whole, and then tackle all the way up to the 2020s. Right? We're in that current decade now, but yeah. And so now I get to share it with my friends and talk about their favorite movie of those decades and why we chose those films. So yeah, that's how it kind of came to be.
Okay. Two questions related to that. Do you have a favorite decade?
Oh no, I had a feeling that would be.
I was going to ask you if you have a favorite movie, but I hate when people ask me that question.
I'm better at
Especially
that.
older people, because I just say, do you have children? Oh yeah, I have 3. I was like, which one's your favorite?
Well, I can tell you as a child myself that I'm the favorite.
Of course.
But no, that's an interesting question, because I mean, I literally, like I was kind of explaining earlier, is I love something from every decade, like so much.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I feel like they have a different answer every day, right? At the moment, I would have to say, I mean, I just watched a lot of Hitchcock films from the 20s, and I really love silent pictures. But I would, I, hmm, I've been watching a lot of 90s films lately. So, and I've been watching a lot of art house 90s films. So that's maybe my decade at the moment that I'm enjoying. And I wouldn't say it's my favorite of all time, but at the moment it's something that I'm discovering. Not so much the Matrix or the Lion King or anything that's big, but I do love those movies. I grew up in the 90s. But that's what I'm watching right now is the 1990s. So what about you? What do you have a favorite decade?
I still say, because 67 is so strong for me, that even though I grew up in the 70s and 80s, it's like the 60s. There's so much change and turmoil, and kind of like getting things back to the way they should be, as far as having freedom of film artistry during that period, especially the latter half of it. That it's, I mean, just look at 67 by itself. The Bonnie and Clyde, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. You have movies around that time. You have like the Wild Bunch and all that stuff. Things that, would send the code era, like they would run to a church immediately because they couldn't believe what was going on. But um, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Everything that's not said in that movie
Oh
is
yeah.
just like over the top. So you have all those movies from that time, and even though it's before I was born, it's like, how did you get away with that? Or creative things like practical effects. How did you do that? You know, everybody talks about George Lucas in the 70s, but going back into the 60s, you see a lot of things that, you know, we would cheat today and do it through a CGI move, but they were doing it with like clay and glue and hands
I
and
do like
stop motion.
I do like stop motion.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we see it back there.
so I mean I mean that's the 50s, the Sinbad 50s, and then right there
Hmm.
is which is it's interesting because thinking about practical effects, like I'm so enamored by the medium itself and the craft of it all.
Yeah,
So I'm completely on board with that change in the 60s, you know, how they're utilizing, you know, their budget and how they're utilizing what they can make versus,
yeah,
you know, cutting corners. Or I mean, it wouldn't always be a cutting corner. It's just it's more convenient and easier now to deal with that stuff. And like, you know, I mean, look at Disney, right? They're doing Mandalorian. They would have some kind of, you know, really great setup of all these different TVs to kind of, you know, showcase that they're in a different location, and it looks great. But
hmm,
there's nothing like going to the actual desert and watching like Lawrence of Arabia, right?
right.
There's, I mean, it's a very different vibe.
And a lot of those things, as far as the practical effects, carried over to the way movies were made in the 70s. I mentioned Star Wars. Then you look at things like disaster movies, whether it's Airport or Towering Inferno or whatever. You know, like I said today, it would almost seem like cheating in comparison to what they had to do back then. So, but all that was really established in the late 50s into the 60s. So there's a lot of reasons. I mean, also you mentioned Hitchcock. That's like the end of his run. I don't count the early 70s films,
Yeah,
but
they're fun, but definitely a little out of
yeah,
touch.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, the 60s brought us Psycho and pretty much his main Universal and Paramount run. So gotta love that.
I couldn't not disagree with that choice because the 60s is incredible. Yeah, yeah. So
All right, last one because I want to see a big smile on your face. I'm not going to ask you your favorite movie. I'll just say, what are some of your favorite movies? Because I see some of them behind you, and I know, but I want you to smile and just talk about them lovingly.
well, you heard that nice little chair here. But honestly, these movies behind me are, I mean, that's the reason why they're in the back is, you know, this half in particular are a lot of my favorite movies right here.
Mhm.
So just to name a few, of course, the trilogies I'll mention. There's the three posters above me, and also that Blu-ray right there from Criterion, the Before trilogy. I love Richard Linklater and those films in particular, kind of even harkening back, like I was saying, to Hateful Eight. I love just locations and people and just having a conversation and seeing what happens from that. Right, it goes and going back to that. Lord of the Rings, of course. I mean, that's probably the films that I watch. I watch all of them in theaters. I remember where I was and, you know, the people I was around when I watched those movies, and it just completely changed my world. I mean, those are my Star Wars. The Lord of the Rings
Yeah,
are my Star Wars because I mean I did watch, of course, Phantom Menace, episode 1, 2, and 3 growing up as well, and I loved those films, and I still enjoy them quite a bit. But Lord of the Rings, I mean, there's nothing that I can quote the movie to death, and there's just so much about it that I've fallen in love with, and I love fantasy. And actually, it's going to go into there's Pan right there. Pan's Labyrinth is another film that is almost related to Lord of the Rings. I mean, I think at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff that I enjoy, there's a fantastical element to it, and I like to get whisked away you can't see it off screen, but I have Fantasia over there, which is probably my favorite Disney movie. I just like this grandiose kind of setup, and then also the emotions connected to all these different types of films really just move me. And I know I'm jumping all over the place, but it leads me to In Bruges, which I mentioned earlier, where I didn't know what the hell to think about it when I first saw it, because I was laughing, but I also saw this very tragic story of these guys going through something that obviously is fantastical, but I don't know, there's something about their anguish was very relatable, and every single time I watch that movie, I get a deeper sense of myself and where I'm at and how I'm dealing with situations, and just understanding at the end of the day, I think a lot of these things, these fantasy and really elements that are related, it's all about caring for another person and having that relationship with other people. I mean, Frodo and Sam in Lord of the Rings, Ethan and Julie and before trilogy, Ken and Harry and all of them in Bruges. These are all things, and Princess Bride's over there too. We got Princess Buttercup and Wesley, and it's all these things that like it's got to be something to do with, like, obviously it's an idealized thing. However, I can't deny my connections with the people who are close to me, and movies are the way. These movies that I've mentioned, and I've left out quite a bit, are just the ways that I empathize with other people and how I connect. And so that's why I go to them, and I enjoy them, and I make a lot of connections to the dots of, at least in my puzzles that happen in my life. So anyway.
That was downright beautiful. You mentioned Lord of the Rings as like your Star Wars, and I've come to realize something. I'm the Star Wars generation. You have Lord of the Rings, you have the Harry Potters, now you have the MCU fans. I can't get mad at the MCU fanaticals, like the dude who saw No Way Home 300 times to beat the record. I can't get mad at that, because I used to stay at somebody's house just because they had a copy of, Empire on VHS before I did. Every generation from the time summer blockbusters began has had their movies like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, your Lord of the Rings, my Star Wars is today's MCU. They just have a lot more movies than we did.
I just have 3, so I mean, obviously there's a show coming out, The Hobbit.
I have 9, but I only claim like 6 or 7 of them. So it's good that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is, it takes you to a place like Lord of the Rings. What it does for me is that as a kid reading the books, and that typical, it's never as good as the books. Yes, it can be. Yes, it can be, unless it's The Hobbit, where they just
yeah, just like, let's make this 300-page book into 800 pages and make
that was a money grab.
Yeah.
That was a money grab.
I had fun. I have fun because I love the place. I love Middle Earth, but I know they're not amazing, so they're fine for me, at least.
I don't want this to end. You want to do the 5 takes?
Let's do it.
And then we'll end it there after that. Name the film that made you fall in love with the movies, taking you from a film watcher to a cinephile.
Lord of the Rings. Maybe In Bruges. I'll just say In Bruges. It's my fancy answer.
Okay. You already did number 2, which is name 5 of your favorite movies, and you did it with a smile. Thank you. Name a classic movie that everybody loves, but you can't stand.
Streetcar Named Desire.
Really?
Not necessarily. I mean, listen, I objectively like it, but I cannot stand the I just don't want to be around those people. Like, very stressful. It's a very stressful situation, and I think that's the reason why I'm like, I don't want people shouting at each other the entire movie, and that's how I feel about it. And of course, I watched this years ago, so I need to rewatch it and get a
Yeah.
fresher take on it. But
My answer for that one is Going with the Wind for many reasons. Name a reviled film that you love. Kind of like the opposite question.
Kung Pao. I don't know. It's not reviled, but I mean, a lot of my movies that I enjoy, like a lot of comedies. Like I rewatched Billy Madison the other day, but I know that's not a reviled film. I'm trying to think of something that I enjoy quite a bit that most people don't. Oh, that's a difficult one. I guess maybe. I mean, I think I know a lot of people who like this movie, but I know a lot of people who don't. So it's very hot or cold. But I really love Interstellar. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Once again, going back to all the things I mentioned earlier, it's got this fantastical element to it, and it just envelops me every time I watch it. Even though it's dumb science, it's not. It's definitely pure magic. But I love that movie, and I know a lot of people who don't like that movie. But I'm like, I think it's the best score that Nolan's ever had. Like
definitely.
Ever. So like, and I still love that movie. So anyway, Interstellar.
I think I need to revisit that one because I saw it like a midnight showing when it first opened, probably half asleep through half of it. And that's a movie where you have to pay attention.
Yeah.
But yet I have it on my watch list for like a price drop because, you know, everyone tells me it's a great 4K.
I have it over there. And you rewatch it. I even have the old Blu-ray with an IMAX reel from it. So
nice.
Yeah. So I kept that and I put it in there.
Did you have fun?
I did have fun.
Who would you like to see me do this with on the channel?
I gotta shout out Sam. This is my good buddy film blogger Sam. I think he'd be great to talk to you.
I will add it to the list. I actually I think I already have him on there.
Let me see. I'm very busy, but
yeah,
if you get a chance, yeah.
That's honestly my first question for him. Is like, where is it? I literally have questions for people I never interviewed before. It's like, how are you enjoying fatherhood or something like that?
Yep.
So
he's a good guy, and I'd love to see him more on the platform, even though he wants to be more on the platform.
Yeah, I miss his frequency of videos that he used to maintain.
Yeah.
But Nathan, I'd like to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Remind the people where they could find you.
You can find me on YouTube. Just type in Nathan Jones. Make sure you add movie review or Blu-ray or something along those lines, because you're going to run across the Australian wrestler from the WWF / actor from Mad Max Fury Road, the new Mortal Kombat, Troy. You recognize him. He's a bald man. He looks very different from me.
He wasn't a guy playing guitar in the front, was he?
No, different guy.
Okay.
He's the brother. Are you talking about Mad Max? He's the biggest brother, like the buff one. That's Nathan Jones. That's me. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube. And then I am also on Twitter, which I don't know my account, so I'll send it to you because Nathan.
I'll include it in the comments.
Yeah, and Letterboxd, and that's where I do most of my film stuff is Letterboxd. I always say something about something I'm watching. So
yeah.
But thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, man, it's been a pleasure of mine, and thank you. You were one of the people who inspired me to start this channel. So I just want to thank you personally.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to future endeavors on both of our channels and that growth, and it's always fun to see. So,
and Criterion Shopping.
Yes, and more Criterion Shopping. I need to still watch. I have so many I haven't seen over there.
Isn't that what we do? We just buy them and put them on a shelf? No,
yeah,
we're supposed to watch them.
Yeah, I'm doing a challenge where I'm trying to get through them. Okay.
Yes, so. I'm doing your ABC challenge. I'm just gonna start on May 1st, so probably in a week or so. And I'm going to start with Anatomy of a Murder because I have it here.
That's what I started with last year.
I remember. So I have it in there, and that's where I'm going to start. Right now, I'm kind of making my list so I don't repeat anything from the last time.
Well, it's hard with X and Q and Z. I know for everyone. I'm totally up for you to choose like Ex Machina, which starts with an E. Totally, it's fine. If you have
I'll get something from the library.
Yeah,
it's not that bad.
Try to find something, everyone.
Yep. Okay, everyone. So till next time, signing off. Have a great day. Go watch a movie.